Are you curious about the 5-2 profile and what this little fraction looking number means for you? Well, don't worry, because you're in the right place, and by the end of this video, you'll get the answers to the following questions. What is the 5-2 profile? What are the characteristics of the 5-2 profile? What's the public role and leadership style of the 5-2? And what are the keys to health and happiness for 5-2s? And we'll even take a look at a famous example of a 5-2 that you might know so that you can see how this profile might be lived out in real life. So if you enjoy this video and want to continue to learn and deepen your understanding of human design, I'd be so grateful if you could show some support by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel. Anyways, welcome back everyone. My name is Crystal Alfarero. I'm founder of the Human Design Academy, and I help people like yourselves make sense of the human design system. So to continue with the profile series, today we're going to be looking at the 5-2 profile. I've done an earlier video on the 2-5 profile, so if you've already watched that, you'll be very familiar with the characteristics of the 5-2. So along with looking at the 5-2, we're also going to explore some of the potential differences between these two profiles as well. So if you're ready to come in and explore more, let's just dive in. All right, so what is the 5-2 profile? Well, the 5-2 profile is known as the Heretic Hermit, which basically combines the magnetic, unconventional, influential, and practical nature of the heretic with the introverted and natural genius and talents of the hermit. It's definitely one of the more rare and harmonic profiles, particularly because the 5th line heretic and the 2nd line hermit both have similarities in that they're both lines of projection. In other words, other people tend to essentially project their own assumptions or beliefs about these people or see them in ways that they might not see themselves. And so there is a bit of a difference. So the 5th line projection is experienced as other people basically projecting onto them, certain assumptions maybe that actually may or may not be true. And this is because the 5th line tends to be more mysterious and obscure. It typically tends to be that this person has the solutions or maybe has something that someone else is looking for, right? Which is why they might find that others are always coming to them for help, right? They're here to save the day, basically. Whereas the 2nd line projection is experienced as other people seeing them for their gifts and their talents that they're generally unaware of unless they're, made aware of it. In other words, they're called out for these specific gifts and talents, right? So as you can imagine, people are constantly coming to 5-2 profiles for something, whether it's their gifts or their talents, or maybe solutions to their problems, etc., right? And while the right projections lead them to that satisfaction if they're generators, peace if they're manifestors, success if they're projectors, or surprise if they're reflectors, it's really important that they're discerning about which projections they're going to follow through with, or which projections are correct for them to live up to. In other words, it's really important for them to follow their personal authority if it's correct for them, or even just set the right boundaries when something that maybe other people are projecting onto them is not correct, right? Setting those boundaries, and that's going to save them from a lot of bitterness, anger, frustration, or disappointment, and just straight up exhaustion. Another thing about 5-2s is that they're often misunderstood by others. And sometimes it can feel like no one truly knows them or experiences them in the same way that they know or experience themselves, or they end up also feeling a little bit used when others call them out for things or need help with certain things, and then basically disappear once that thing has been completed or has been resolved, right? Which is why it's also very important for them to be discerning about when to share their gifts and when to provide solutions, and to not take things personally when this does happen. Next, what does the 5-2 profile consist of, and what makes it different from the 2-5 profile? Well, the 5-2 profile consists of the conscious line 5 heretic and the unconscious line 2 hermit, which basically come together to create this heretic hermit profile. So one of the biggest differences that we do see between the 2-5 and the 5-2 is that there's this switch between the conscious and unconscious hexagram lines. So first of all, rather than being a personal profile like the 2-5, which has a personal destiny and this personal self-focus that can often create karma, or let's say create certain consequences that they're left to navigate and learn from, right? The 5-2 profile is transpersonal. It sees life from a more transpersonal perspective. In other words, they tend to be more concerned with others as opposed to themselves. More concerned with others and trying to fix other people's lives rather than maybe focusing on their own. So there tends to be more of this transpersonal karma that's carried with it. In other words, a transpersonal profile, or in this case, the 5-2, has this role in this lifetime to basically help clean up the karma that others might leave behind, or that is created by others, right? So on a surface level, 2-5s can create karma because of their more personal self nature, whereas 5-2s tend to help clean up karma because of their transpersonal nature. And now when we break down both sides of this profile, just remember that the 5th line is the heretic archetype. This represents the conscious personality, the mind, how they think, because it's on the top part of this like fraction looking number. It's the conscious side of it. So this side of their nature tends to be more conscious to them. They have access to this conscious they have conscious access to this side of themselves. This is the part of them that's more mysterious and magnetic, right? It's that savior part of their nature that lives in that projection field where other people project onto them certain expectations, right? Typically, like I said before, that this person can save them, right? That they have the solutions for them that they need. And it's by engaging with the right projections, when they're both aligned and when they're able to provide practical solutions, that they find a huge source of their fulfillment and, satisfaction. Next, we have the 2nd line Hermit, which is on the other side of this profile because it represents the unconscious design. It's essentially the body and their physical experience because it's on the bottom half of that fraction looking number. So this is the side of their nature that is something that they're generally unaware of, right? It's part of that unconscious nature. It's that automatic script that runs in the background without their conscious awareness. And this is that introverted yet naturally gifted side of them. Again, like maybe over time, this is something that you discover about yourself. But this is someone that is here to share their gifts with the right callings. And it's through these right callings that this is where you find a huge source of personal fulfillment. And so now we're going to go into these 2 lines in a bit more detail. So I'm just going to park it for now. What are the characteristics of the conscious line 5 of their profile? So on a conscious level, the line 5 heretic is the part of their nature that's all about universalization, which essentially means that they have a role in sharing and bringing forth new norms, new maybe beliefs, practical solutions, or just something completely different to the collective, right? They're here to shake up the status quo, shake up and change the way that we're doing things. And so they also become known for maybe the practical solutions that they're able to provide. And this is what people are seeking them for. It's all about practicality with the 5th line. So this 5th line frequency is designed to universalize. In other words, share and spread the message, share these new beliefs and norms that they have. They have this magnetic and seductive quality because of its mysteriousness. So sometimes people don't tend to see them very clearly and basically have to guess and project what it is that's going on. But it's this mystery that kind of draws people in and attracts the attention of others, especially strangers. And so the 5th line is also a line of influence, similar to the 4th line, but the difference being that the 4th line influences their close relationships and networks, right? Their inner circle, whereas the 5th line has the potential to influence the masses, influence a large number of people. Their influence is on large groups of people outside of their close network, and it tends to be the strangers and the acquaintances that they have most influence on. Again, it's not saying this is concrete, set in stone, that you're absolutely gonna influence all these huge masses of people, but it's just it's a part of that fifth line quality. It has the potential. It's all about potential to influence the masses and draw in, big groups of people. And yeah, I wanted to emphasize that this could also be people that are going to be more at an arm's length, right? People that are maybe a little bit more distance from you rather than people in your close network. Not to say that you can't influence your close network, but it can also be extended away outside of that. And so the people that they do draw into their projection field project certain expectations or judgments onto them that may or may not be true. Sometimes these projections can be positive projections, sometimes not so positive projections, but these projections still draw people towards them, which gives them the ability to have different encounters and opportunities in their lives that they need in order to fulfill and live out their purpose. So it's really important for you, if you have this fifth line, if you're a 5-2, to be very discerning with your strategy and authority about which of these projections you choose to engage with, because you do not have to engage with all of them. In a low expression, the fifth line can be sometimes paranoid or suspicious of the projections of others, usually because of maybe past experiences where, maybe they weren't able to fulfill or satisfy projection and got blamed for something when trying to help. So maybe they tried to avoid any kind of projection. So again, it's really important for them to follow that strategy and authority to discern which of these projections are correct to satisfy, because there's still fulfillment that is found on the other side of the right projections. Another thing with 5-2s is that sometimes they can be left feeling used and only visible when people need you. So they might have encountered many different instances where they've put so much effort and energy into serving others and then kind of become invisible once that problem's resolved for the other person. And so this can cause them to maybe initiate things in order to feel validated or valued and needed. And so it's just important to recognize this and to not take it so personally, and not try to, especially if you have an open heart center, not try to prove yourself, right? Be able to also set healthy boundaries if you feel like you're being taken advantage of. Now we're going to move on to the characteristics of the unconscious line 2 of the 5-2 profile. So on an unconscious level, the line 2 or hermit side of this profile is the more introverted and naturally gifted part of their nature. There's something that's specific or inherent in them that's waiting to be called out, right? Whether it's a singing talent, whether it's this athletic talent, or even their leadership ability, or maybe even their unique perspective and way of thinking, right? We can sometimes see these things in their chart, but in general, they often don't even see their gifts very clearly, right? Or they don't know what they're good at because it comes so natural to them. And for them, because it's natural, we kind of tend to associate easy with being, not valuable. But that's not the case with these hermit, these second line beings, right? They have these natural talents that are very valuable. But again, sometimes it's just harder for them to see. Especially with the second line being the unconscious side of their nature, it can be even harder for them to see or be aware of what their gifts are. So it's really important for them to be in the right environment so that they can be recognized by other people and called out by the right people. Even though they're, let's say you're not even a projector, right? I feel like second lines or 5-2s really need to be in the right environment so that they are recognized by the right people. Thing is, for some second lines, this can be a little bit difficult because there is that introverted or antisocial part of their nature that wants to just keep to themselves and do their own thing. But the thing with this profile is that they can never stay hiding for too long because the fifth line just wants to come out to play and save the day. And the second line also lives in that projection field like the fifth line, where they're noticed by others for their gifts and talents, and they're eventually called out by other people to share these gifts and talents that they do have. And again, because they're naturally gifted, they often don't know how they know things. And, in some cases that I've definitely seen, they tend to get nervous if they're either expected to explain how they do what they do, or prove how they know what they can do, or explain how they do what they do. I'm sorry if I just jumbled that up. But anyways, so if they're in any kind of teaching capacity, it might even help for them to simply show what they do rather than try to explain things in this step-by-step way. Not to say that they can, but if it feels more comfortable with you, you might be better, or it might be more natural to show and not only tell what it is that you do, right? Otherwise, they're very happy to just kind of sit at home and do their own thing. And they're meant to be called out by others and apply what they naturally do well when they're called out by the right people, or, when they're being discerning about which of these projections are correct for them to fulfill. So if you have a line 2, maybe reflect and ask yourself what others are constantly calling you out for, right? What they're asking you to participate in, or what they're asking you to help with. This is one of the best ways you can discover what your gifts are. In the lower expression of the second line, this can look like someone who isolates themselves and may be very doubtful in their own ability to fulfill any calls or to fulfill any requests, to share their gifts and their talents and their solution, or actually maybe not solutions, that's the fifth line. But again, going back to the second line, it's really important to follow your strategy and authority, to be discerning about which calls to enter, right? Otherwise, this can be very exhausting and unfulfilling for you. And when you do accept the right calls, this is what leads to the most fulfillment and satisfaction in life's process, right? You'll be led to the right circumstances and people and start to feel more comfortable and confident in these particular environments, which then will give you the fuel to live out the projections that you're here to fulfill, right? This is what leads second lines to actually getting to experience the most success, fulfillment, satisfaction, peace, and surprise in the process. So if you have a 5-2 profile, let me know down in the comments how you experience your profile. All right, so what's the public role and leadership style of the 5-2 profile? Well, the public role of the 5-2 is to be the messenger natural, who's basically here to save the day with their unconventional, practical solutions and also their natural gifts and talents. Their leadership style is that of the conscious fifth line, which is known as the general, which you can think of as the archetype of the military general who has the potential to save the day in times of crisis, again, with their practical solutions. And through this, they attract this loyal following from others, this loyalty from others, this trust with others. On the other hand, their leadership style through the unconscious second line is what we call the democratic leader, who has this great potential to be a natural leader when they're elected by others, when they're elected by the right others and it's the right calling for them. So it's kind of like stepping up to the plate when you're recognized and invited by a certain group or certain people to get the job done. And last but not least, what is the key to health and happiness for 5-2s? Well, the key to health and happiness for 5-2s is number 1, boundaries, and number 2, alone time. So regarding boundaries, very similar to the 2-5, the 5-2 is someone that others tend to have very high expectations for, and they might feel a lot of pressure to live up to the projections and expectations that others have for them. They can experience a lot of people coming to them for help, which brings an important need for boundaries. Otherwise, they can find themselves very overextended or just completely unfulfilled, right? But in order to set appropriate boundaries, it's really important for them to be clear, to become clear on what they can actually do, right? What they're actually capable of fulfilling, or at least discern which projections feel true and correct to live up to, and which ones are just inaccurate, right? This process of discernment, it's not something that's always very easy. It's a lot easier said than done. And so it does require a lot of self-awareness and it can take time. So leaning into their correct strategy and authority can help them be guided to the correct projections, right? And the correct calls that are beneficial or valuable for them to fulfill. And that way, they aren't spending too much time and energy trying to meet unrealistic expectations that other people are holding holding on them and therefore wasting their energy and just feeling drained by the process. As it relates to their alone time, their unconscious body is the second line hermit. And this is someone that needs to get away from projections once in a while so that they can decompress from that pressure and they can just have the time and space to nurture their natural gifts and talents, right? And as they stay true to this process, as they stay true to their own processes as a hermit and immerse themselves in the things that they love, in the right callings for them, this is where they have that potential to have their gifts expand and have the right callings, really be that pathway to that success, that satisfaction, peace and surprise, that fulfillment that they're looking for. Now, who's a famous 5-2 that you might know? Well, we have Canadian singer Justin Bieber. Now, I invite you to just notice all the initial judgments or maybe feelings that you might have about him when I say his name, right? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they mixed feelings? This is the 5-2 projection field at work. As a second line being, he's someone that was discovered on YouTube at a very young age for his singing talents, right? Natural singing talents, gifts and talents. He was discovered by his manager, Scooter Braun, I think that's his name, in 2008 when he was only 14. These are the gifts that he's become known for and that he's called out for. And I personally think it's pretty clear that he has these musical gifts. I was a big fan of his covers when I first found him on YouTube back in the day when he was singing, I think it was like With You from Chris Brown. But yeah, it was very obvious from a very young age. He has these natural gifts and talents, and he was then called out for them. As for his fifth line, remember that there's this unconventional, maybe provocative, mysterious nature that seduces us and draws us in to project certain assumptions or beliefs about him. So because that fifth line is more obscure, others tend to guess what this person is truly like. We never really know them unless we're close to them. Even those that are close to them still may never truly know them. And with Justin Bieber, we've essentially seen him grow up, right? We've seen him as this 14-year-old boy, and now he's a 30-year-old man that is married. And so again, we've seen that entire youth, and because a lot of the drama that maybe he was in or things that he did, it was very public. This created this, even, I'm going to say, bigger projection field for him, right? It left us with this image that he was this rebel. I mean, at least if you've been following Justin Bieber, it kind of left us with this image that he was trouble, that he was a rebel, etc., right? But now he's coming to the end of his Saturn return. He's 30 years old, and he's significantly matured over the years, right? We've seen that growth process. Obviously he's still young and has a lot of stuff to learn, but we can see that huge transformation, right? He's gone back to his religious roots. He's now a very devout Christian. He's been married to Hailey Baldwin since 2018. And I think they're all actually also expecting a baby soon. He's also had experience with health scares, which he had to basically cancel his 2022 world tour for. And he's right now, I think he's been staying out of the spotlight and really nurturing that second line as he continues to make music. But I can only imagine that this is just the beginning for Justin Bieber, right? It's a new chapter. And he actually started to make Christian music. I didn't know that. And he recently topped the Christian album chart for the first time. And I think that could even be one of the unconventional ways that he brings his talents to share a new message and to influence the masses as this 5-2 profile. All right, so now we've come to the end of this video, but if you're wanting to get that extra help to understand your 5-2 profile and get a holistic overview of this aspect in the context of your overall chart, I do offer one-to-one human design readings that include a 90-minute Zoom call plus a customized 30-page human design blueprint of your own unique design, and that's for your own learning and reflection. And I'll leave a link in the description with all of that information down below. And this brings me to the end of this episode where we answer the following questions. What is the 5-2 profile? What are the characteristics of the 5-2 profile? What's the public role and leadership style of the 5-2? What are the keys to health and happiness for 5-2s? And we even looked at Justin Bieber as an example of how the 5-2 profile can be lived out and experienced and seen in real life. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd be so grateful if you could show me some love, hit that like button, and hit subscribe to continue learning more about the wonderful human design system. So with that said, have an amazing day or evening wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.